I doubt that Christmas will ever leave me. It's not because it was as warm and enchanted as those depicted in films, but because that was the first time I ever saw the naked, unvarnished reality. It took place at our yearly family Christmas dinner, which I had been attending since I was a young child. The house, cuisine, and people were all the same, but this time there was a difference in the atmosphere. Sharper, colder. And for some reason, it wasn't until they began distributing the gifts that I realized how far I had been pushed out. My arrival was a bit late, but not by much. I arrived approximately 20 minutes later than the others. It seemed like I had disturbed something precious when I went in, even though I had texted my mom to let her know beforehand. Nobody came over to say hello. Nobody even took a moment to stop talking. Without anyone noticing, I removed my coat and crept into the kitchen, setting the homemade pumpkin pie I had been making for 3 hours on the counter. I glanced around the living room and found all the chairs occupied. Every chair in the living room was occupied. The tiny bench in the corner creaked and was disliked by everyone. My younger cousin Lily, who couldn't have been older than 10, glanced up and said, "Oh, I think you can sit on the floor," after I stood there awkwardly for a bit. Then, as if I were background noise, she returned to her tablet. So I took a seat on the ground, standing by the tree, cross-legged, as if I were the assistant. Dinner passed quickly. People passed dishes over me as if I were furniture. Nobody inquired about my intentions for the upcoming year, how I was doing, or how work was going. Despite my repeated attempts to interrupt, they simply continued chatting over me. I didn't even seem to be there. The present exchange, which everyone had been anticipating, finally arrived. My aunt, who was always in charge, got up and jingled a small bell as if she were a joyful elf. They all laughed and clapped. The children let out an excited squeal. She then began yelling names as she distributed boxes wrapped in vibrant colors from beneath the tree. My name was not mentioned. Not once. I saw cousins I hardly know opening pricey devices. Amanda, my sister, received a high-end handbag. Even my other cousin's new boyfriend, who had only joined the family 2 months prior, received a personalized hoodie featuring the family's insignia. And me? Nothing. Not a card. It's not a candy cane. Not even a bad Christmas greeting. Then Amanda turned to face me and said in a whisper, "Oh, I guess yours got lost in the shuffle." She didn't even seem sorry. She sounded amused. I had trembling hands. I recall putting my hands in my lap to prevent them from shaking. I had no intention of crying. Not present. Not in their presence. But something broke inside of me in that silence. It wasn't just being left out, it was also realizing that this was nothing new. I had always been the last to be considered. The process was simple and straightforward. The person who was supposed to be kind and helpful without ever expecting anything in return. I pondered, how did I get here? As I surveyed the room. How did I get so invisible? I remained seated until the room was empty. The laughter vanished into other corners, and the wrapping paper spread out like confetti on the floor of a party to which I was never invited. And nobody bid me farewell as I gathered my coat. Nobody raised their heads, and that's when I realized I needed to take action. I thought I was being overly sensitive, that perhaps my constant sense of exclusion was the issue. The indicators, however, were always present. That Christmas wasn't an unexpected event. Decades of being treated as though I was somehow inferior culminated in that. My older sister, Amanda, was always the star of the family when I was growing up. She always had the best room, the new clothes, and the better birthday celebrations, even when we were young. I can obviously recall my 7th birthday not because it was particularly memorable, but rather because I didn't receive one. According to my parents, money was tight that year. However, 2 weeks later, they had a surprise party for Amanda at a skating rink, complete with a pony-shaped bespoke cake. It was just lousy timing, I told myself. I was ecstatic to receive partial scholarship acceptance to my preferred university. I earned it via hard effort. I studied all night long and participated in as many extracurricular activities as I could. I hoped that today would be the time when my parents would finally say, "We're proud of you." However, my mother responded, "But it's not a full scholarship, right?" My dad also mentioned that Amanda was admitted on her own merits and didn't require a scholarship. I never received any tuition assistance from them. I worked 2 part-time jobs and took out loans. Amanda's entire schooling, meanwhile, was covered without any questions. However, I didn't grumble. I simply continued. I secretly believed that if I put forth more effort, they would eventually notice me, that I would eventually merit a place at their table, both physically and emotionally. That seat was never provided. Spoiler alert. Guess who gave up everything to drive Amanda a U-Haul when she needed assistance moving across the nation for her new job? Me. When does mom need someone to cook and clean for a week after surgery? Me. When did dad require assistance with his taxes? Me. I was always the one. However, nobody showed up when I injured my ankle last year and was unable to walk for weeks. Not even a single person offered to provide groceries. I got by on takeout and canned soup. My coworker Jess was the only one to call. We've been friends for 2 years. I've known my family my entire life. And yet I continued to appear. I continued to show up for reunions, holidays, and birthdays. I cleaned, I baked, and despite the agony, I smiled. At work, Jess sat across from me one day and asked me directly, "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" I blinked. What are you doing? Pleading for affection from those who obviously don't appreciate you. That was like a kick to the stomach, since I was at a loss for an answer. Was it allegiance? Habit? I was afraid of being alone. I had no idea, but that question haunted me. I began to relive every second, every underappreciated achievement, every instance in which I was the last to find out or invited, if I was invited at all. The time my family planned a beach vacation without me was one particular memory that stuck out. I learned about it because I wasn't in the group photo that Amanda shared on Instagram with the comment, "Family time." They didn't even inform me that they were leaving. My mother responded, "Oh, we thought you'd be busy," when I questioned her about it. "You must have a lot of work. Don't apologize. Not guilty. I still didn't lose my temper. I simply embraced it because I had been trained to do that. But after that Christmas, something changed inside of me. I was no longer able to avoid seeing it. I have to stop deceiving myself. I didn't belong to the family. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I was helpful. I was easy to use, predictable, perhaps disposable as well. And I muttered to myself, I can't do this anymore, as I lay awake that night and stared at my small apartment ceiling. It's not that I didn't adore them. However, I came to the realization that they never truly loved me back. They never showed me the love I needed. Not in the manner I merited. And that's when the quiet inside of me started to break. My hands shook when I told my family no for the first time. It wasn't a spectacular act of defiance. Amanda asked me to watch her golden retriever, Charlie, for the weekend while she and her husband went skiing in a straightforward group text. I wouldn't have hesitated before. I would have agreed, changed my plans, and most likely even produced handmade dog treats. However, I simply gazed at the message for 10 minutes this time. Then, gradually, I typed, "I'm afraid I can't." "I have plans." I sent it and bided their time. "Wow, okay," was Amanda's passive-aggressive response 3 minutes later. That is not what was expected. I didn't give an explanation. I didn't soften it. I simply allowed the silence to persist. And in that quiet, I experienced a sense of control that I hadn't had in a while. I started to back off then, slowly and silently. Not every call was answered by me. I did not attend all of the family brunches. Before they even asked, I stopped offering assistance. Initially, nobody paid attention. Or perhaps they did, but it didn't matter to them. However, I took note. And every tiny boundary I established served as a brick in the wall I was erecting around the parts of myself that I had revealed too readily. After then, something unexpected occurred. The night was a Friday. Despite everything, I continued to bring food for Mom and Dad every other week, so I had gone over to their house. I suppose old habits die hard. Like I always did, I entered through the back door. Mom, Dad, Amanda, and her husband Kevin were all in the living room, and I could hear them. When I heard my name, I stopped. "She's so dramatic," Amanda said in a light-hearted, humorous tone. "You should have seen her Christmas expression, as if she truly thought someone would get her something." They all chuckled. I told you she's always been too sensitive, my mother added. She must always feel like she belongs. It wears you out. It's not like she does anything special, Kevin continued. She expects a medal and only brings store-bought cookies. My heart was racing as I stood motionless in the kitchen, carrying grocery bags. The words alone weren't enough. They stated things in a nonchalant manner, as if making fun of me was commonplace. As if, when I wasn't there, I was the family joke. They were also unaware that I was only 5 feet away. The groceries were not dropped by me. I didn't barge in shouting. I simply placed the bags on the counter with care and left through the door. They were completely unaware. I drove quietly home, no music. Don't cry. Just this constricted sensation in my chest that persisted. I had a blank notebook in front of me as I sat at my kitchen table that evening. At the top of the page, I scrawled the words "enough now." I then compiled a list. Not a vengeance list. It is a list of boundaries that I would never breach, a set of things I would never do again. No more arriving without permission. Giving without receiving is over. I will no longer remain silent when I am harmed. No more acting like this was the ordinary. I felt like I was changing the rules of our relationship for the first time in my life, demanding it through my absence, not asking for better. And perhaps the most agonizing aspect? They had yet to phone to inquire about my whereabouts. However, that was all right, because I was no longer waiting. I had a plan, and I wouldn't be the doormat the next time they saw me. It would be as if they didn't know you, someone who didn't require their blessing. I didn't announce anything significant. I didn't lose my temper or send a lengthy, tearful mail outlining my reasons for leaving. No, they would have gotten too much credit for it, too much authority. Rather, I vanished as quietly as possible. I started by canceling my parents' automatic grocery delivery service, which I had been paying for every 2 weeks. I said nothing whatsoever. I just closed my laptop after logging into the app and hitting the cancel button. I first organized my shared family calendar, which I had made years ago to assist in remembering events, appointments, and birthdays. I will no longer be organizing or reminding you. The position of family secretary was no longer mine. The most intimate step followed. I slipped the extra key, which I had kept on my keychain for more than 10 years, inside a plain envelope and brought it to my parents' house. Not a word, only the key. I left the envelope next to the microwave on the kitchen counter the next time I dropped off their groceries, which I honestly knew would be the last time. I left without turning around. The queries started to come in by the next week. This time, did you forget to bring the groceries? Has the syncing of your calendar stopped? We nearly missed our appointment with Dad. Have you been occupied? I haven't seen you for a long time, however, I didn't respond. It wasn't the absence of words, not the calls that were missed. I read them, however, I didn't respond to them. Still, there was no mention of Christmas. Don't apologize. No explanation. Not even a flimsy justification like "we intended to give you your gift later." So I said nothing. A week went by. Next, 2. Amanda texted back saying, "Hey, Mom said you haven't been answering. What's happening?" I gazed at her text. I kept my fingertips above the keyboard. I then typed, "Nothing is happening. Simply busy. I hope everyone is doing well." Brief, courteous, far away, she answered. All right, strange. In any case, we require a favor. Kevin's cousin is staying with us while she visits the area. Could you help prepare the guest room? They then attempted to reintegrate me as if nothing had changed. As if I was still free, still trustworthy, still the fixer they turned to. I didn't reply at all this time. My mother called a few days later. Twice. The next day, Amanda appears 3 more times. Amanda comes next. I didn't respond. I knew that the silence was making them insane. I spent a few days away that weekend. It was just me and the road. I stayed in a small cabin in the woods, far away from civilization. Watching the sun sink through the woods, I switched off my phone and sipped tea by the fire. For the first time, I felt genuinely alone, not in the depressing, lonely sense I frequently experience during family vacations, but rather in the sense of clarity that comes from being alone. The healing sort. There were 7 voicemails and 23 missed calls when I returned. From family all. My mother said, "Sweetheart, we're worried all at once. Why don't you answer?" Amanda's voice in a different one. "Are you angry?" You're behaving strangely. Mom is getting nervous about it. It's funny. When I sat by myself at the Christmas dinner table, they weren't nervous. They joked, drank wine, and ignored me while I was serving plates, so they weren't concerned. The only reason they were concerned was that I was no longer doing my role. Then an intriguing thing occurred. While going through my inbox one evening, I came upon a notification. I had been paying for a Netflix membership on the common account we all used, but it had failed. I allowed it to fail. Netflix isn't working, Amanda texted 2 hours later. Is it anything you can fix? I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, are you all right? After 20 minutes, did we make a mistake? Oh, at last. A split in the mask. Still, I remained silent. They believed I was playing a bluff, that I was simply being irritable, that, as usual, I would turn around. However, they were unaware that I had already begun to make movements this time, quiet ones, strong ones. I wasn't finished yet. I reclined back on the couch, took a deep, peaceful breath, and smiled as I shut off my phone once more. Is this quiet? It wasn't empty anymore. It was deliberate. I had no intention of facing them. Not initially. Perhaps, I reasoned, I could just slowly disappear, like a lost tune, fade from their lives. Allow them to ponder and sit with the void they have produced. However, life has a humorous way of guiding you into unexpected experiences. Moments that, until they happen, you didn't think you had the bravery for. First, there was a phone call. My phone rang as I was going to pour myself a glass of wine after getting home from work and kicking off my shoes. Amanda was the one. I allowed it to ring and ring and ring. I didn't respond. Then it buzzed once more, indicating a voicemail. Hey, I'm not sure what's going on, but Mom mentioned that you're coming over this weekend to celebrate Dad's birthday. As usual, she expects you to bring the cake and the decorations. Could you tell me if you plan to do it or if I should? I chuckled. Aloud. That sour, disbelieving laugh that results from years of suppressing your emotions. They were still counting on me to arrive, to bake the cake, to embellish, to sweep, serve, smile, and disappear into the distance. No, how are you? No, are you all right? No, we apologize for the events of Christmas. Expectations only. That was the time. I knew I wasn't going to disappear as I stood there looking at my phone with the voicemail still playing in the background. I would have arrived. Not as the assistant, though. Not as the sibling who is invisible. Not as the one who smiled through agony and silently swallowed it. No. I was going to be myself. I made some calls of my own the following day. My dad's favorite cake, Black Forest, was the one I requested when I contacted a bakery. Under Amanda's name, I had it delivered straight to the residence. That evening, I reserved a table for myself at a nearby restaurant somewhere lovely, with candlelight and white tablecloths, a place where wine was served in crystal, and people talked softly. After that, I put on my clothes. Not in my typical blend-in-the-wall attire or comfortable pants. No. I sported a striking crimson gown, the one who made me feel alive and perfectly embraced my contours. I wore the heels that made me feel 10 feet tall, painted my lips, and let my hair down. The celebration was just getting started when I drove to my parents' house, where the cake and decorations had already been delivered. Without knocking, I entered. People turned. Conversation stopped in the middle of sentences. I didn't arrive late. I arrived on time. My mother seems taken aback. Not the kind of surprise that makes you happy to be here. Wait a minute. Why are you here? Amanda looked at it as if she had seen a ghost. Well, there she is, remarked Dad, laughing nervously. I gave them a courteous nod, smiled, and moved on. Into the kitchen. After pouring a glass of wine for myself and taking a deep breath, I went back to the living room where everyone was seated around the cake I had ordered. Amanda finally broke the silence at that point. She tried to appear informal as she said, Hey, thanks for the cake. You were not required to, I said. You're welcome. With a tiny incline of my head, I reasoned that I might as well perform one last act of kindness before I quit playing the servant. The room went cold. I went on. You know, after Christmas, I came to a realization. After you all gave me one present after another, you all somehow forgot about me. Nobody spoke. I moved in closer. I have dedicated my entire life to giving, showing up, lending a hand, remembering birthdays, purchasing presents, planning events, and prioritizing everyone. What did I receive in exchange? I held up a hand before Amanda could open her mouth. No, don't claim that it was an error. Please don't act as though you intended to give me something later, since you didn't. We are all aware of it. My mother appeared to want to talk, but she was unable to find the right words. I didn't hold out. I'm not here to stir things up. My purpose is not to dispute. All I wanted to convey was this, plain and simple. Slowly, I turned to look into each of their eyes. I'm finished. I've had enough of being invisible. The assistant. The person who never makes a request. The one you assume is normal. Amanda had big eyes. What are you saying, wait? I grinned, but my eyes didn't meet it. This was my last party, I'm saying. I went over to the front door. And the Netflix subscription too? The groceries? The calendar that's shared? I canceled everything. I'm confident you'll figure it out. My father appeared as though he may object. However, I denied him the opportunity. You all believed that I would never leave, that I would be there all the time, discreetly tidying up your mess. However, you overlooked one thing. I stopped at the door, my hand resting on the handle. The glue was me. And let's see how long you stay together now that I'm gone. After that, I left. The door was not slammed by me. I refrained from crying. I didn't turn around. Alone, but not lonely, I got into my car, put on some music, and went to my dinner reservation. I felt free for the first time in years. What followed? Let's just say that the actual unraveling had not yet begun. I couldn't have screamed that night, but the silence that followed my departure was louder. The next day, I didn't hear from any of them. Or the following day. I was astonished at first. I anticipated receiving a ton of calls, texts, and guilt trips on my phone. However, nothing. Nothing except emptiness. Oddly, I even welcomed it. That week, I was at ease. I came home and lit candles. Real food, not leftovers from cleaning up after others, was what I prepared for myself for supper. I didn't watch the movies Amanda chose. I watched the ones I enjoyed. I didn't care what I was missing, so I kept my phone on silent. However, when others are accustomed to possessing parts of you, tranquility does not endure forever. The phone eventually rang on the 6th day. Mom was there. I let the voicemail go. Then it rang once more, Amanda. I responded this time. I was intrigued, not because I missed her. Her voice cracked and sounded brittle. Hey, she said, it wasn't necessary for you to humiliate us in that way. I crossed one leg over the other and sat down slowly. Funny, I quietly responded. When you distributed gifts and ignored me, you didn't appear embarrassed. That was not the same, was it? Quiet? Then she said it. Mom is going crazy. She claims that she was unaware of how much you were suppressing. I said she never asked. A pause occurred. She's overwhelmed now. Dad forgot to refill his medications. The bills aren't paid and the Christmas cards haven't been sent. I'm taking care of everything. The sharpness in her voice, the fear of someone who had never had to bear weight before, was nearly audible to me. I said nothing. She went on. What's the worst? Grandma is furious. Why didn't you see her for New Year's? She inquired. I was at a loss for words. She believes we shoved you out. I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes. Perhaps, I whispered. That's because you did. There was a lot of unraveling in the days that followed. According to a cousin I spoke with, my mom sobbed in front of the whole family and said I had left them. My dad sent me another note, asking for assistance in resolving the cable bill, rather than offering an apology. After I stepped back, Amanda emailed a screenshot of their group chat, which was filled with desperate messages about who would plan Easter brunch. I didn't respond. It wasn't spiteful. Out of peace, that is. For each day spent apart from them was like releasing layers of anguish. I was unaware I was harboring. I went for walks once more, lengthy ones. Fresh air, no destination. I kept a journal. I enrolled in the community center's watercolor class. A friend I hadn't seen in 3 years joined me for dinner. After hours of conversation, she said, "You look lighter." And I sensed it. I sensed that I had no obligation. The lack of bitterness. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was calming. Then one evening I heard someone knock on my door. My mother was inside when I opened it. She had a store-bought cake and a weak smile as she stood there. She said, "I thought maybe we could talk. Put the past behind you." For the first time in a long time, I actually looked at her. She appeared to be older, somehow smaller. However, I didn't move aside. I said, "Thank you for coming," instead. However, no, not this evening. Her expression dropped. "I'm trying," she said in a whisper. "I understand," I murmured softly. "However, I'm not prepared. Perhaps you're not too." She gave a long nod, wiped away what might have been a tear, and left with the cake in her hand. I shut the door, not because I was angry, not to impose punishment, but for protection. I sat on the floor that night and watched a single candle flicker. I also started crying, not out of melancholy, but from the moment of release. At last, the child within me that used to plead for attention was quiet. She was occupying space, the woman I had become, talking intelligibly, refusing without feeling guilty. My need for vengeance had changed. It was restorative, peace prevailed, and I wasn't scared to have it for the first time. Nearly a year has passed since that Christmas. It's been a year since I sat by myself, while everyone else opened presents they said were thoughtfully selected. It has been a year since I came to the realization that I had been merely the supporting role in my own life, there to cook, clean, organize, and then quietly go once more. A year has also passed since I stopped requesting a seat at their table. I no longer reside in the same home. I never check in. I don't linger in the hopes of being required. I wake up now in a light-filled tiny flat. I really maintain a plant alive on my windowsill. The stories I choose for myself are on a bookcase. No judgment, but I prefer my coffee with additional cinnamon. I dance in the kitchen while waiting for my bread. It means something to me, and I call it home. The silence still surprises me sometimes. There was no shouting coming from the other room, no signs of passive aggression, no concern masquerading as guilt, just silence. However, it's the consoling sort. And now I see them on my terms, because yes, I do occasionally. A few weeks ago, I ran into Amanda at the grocery store. She appeared worn out. Emotionally, rather than physically, she still had that polished, put together appearance. The kind of fatigue that coffee and lipstick can't cover up. She grinned as if nothing had occurred. I also grinned. However, I didn't pause to talk. I owed her nothing. Picking the spaghetti, I liked the kind I used to avoid because she felt it was too bland. I continued to stroll with my basket. Since Mom walked up with the cake that evening, I haven't heard anything from her. Over the months, she hasn't sent any messages. A little guilty, a little sweet. "I miss you," one person said. "Can we begin again?" However, I didn't respond. Not because I despise her, because I now have a greater love for myself. You see, when you've spent your entire life helping the family, they can't fathom you without them. They count on you to always return, always forgive, always arrive early, and always stay late. However, I no longer live as that version of myself. I have boundaries in the world I live in now, where I can make the most of my time, where no is a whole phrase. I now have pals who genuinely wait for my response when they inquire about my day. I've gotten back in touch with former college classmates. Previously, Sundays were about tidying up everyone else's mess, so I never let myself go to Sunday brunch. I joined a local group for writers. I've been writing short stories, primarily about women who vanish and then come back stronger than before. A community publication picked up one of my stories. "It feels like you've lived this," the editor added. I grinned as well, since I had. Sometimes I still think about that Christmas. As I sat there after the gift was distributed with smiles and inside jokes that excluded me, I could still picture how it felt to sit there with my hands folded in my lap. However, the memory no longer hurts. It no longer burns as well as it once did. It only serves as a reminder of my progress. I'm not upset. I'm not resentful. I just finished. And that is the most potent location I have ever visited. For anyone seeing this who has ever experienced being the invisible one, the one who is neglected, disregarded, or skipped hear this, their approval is not necessary for you to exist. Love that ought to have come naturally to you doesn't have to be earned. Additionally, you are not required to remain where you have always been. Leave. Get better. Even if your voice trembles the first time you use it, find it again. Allow them to sit in silence once they know you're gone. because sometimes the loudest message you can convey is quiet. I wanted an apology, but I didn't get it. However, I provided myself with the necessary closure. Additionally, know that you are not alone if you have ever felt alienated within your own family. You also deserve better.